Good afternoon and welcome to NCIA's Industry Essentials Educational Webinar Series, our premier digital educational platform featuring a variety of interactive programs to provide you timely, engaging, and essential education when and where your team needs it most. My name is Brian Gilbert, the Deputy Director of Events here at NCIA. And as always, I'm very excited to welcome you all to another stellar edition of our Service Solutions series of programs this morning, with a session being presented by the team at KPA. All right, now let's get this show on the road. We all know creating a highly effective safety and compliance program can pose unique challenges for cannabis companies. However, organizations that follow best practices for safety and compliance truly see major benefits. In today's program entitled Stay Compliant and Increase Productivity with an Effective Safety Program, being presented by KPA, you'll hear some real-world examples of how cannabis companies are managing their safety programs, alongside a short demonstration of their easy-to-use software that can help you automate the entire process. Well, we've got a great presentation lined up for you and an amazing panel to facilitate, so let's not waste any more time. To kick things off, I'd like to welcome our panel for today's session, Joe Souza, District Manager of EHS Operations, as well as Dagen Boyd, Director of Business Development from KPA, to the virtual stage to kick things off. They'll provide a quick overview of the panel and outline of today's subject. So welcome to NCIA's Industry Essentials. Great to have you here today, Joe and Dagen. You both can activate your video or audio feeds for a quick introduction now, and then take it away from here, Joe.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for joining, and appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk to you about how to implement an effective safety program. A little background on myself. I'm the district manager for KPA. I manage 9 states on the West Coast, states like California, Washington, Oregon, Hawaii, so on and so forth. I've got about 26 consultants out in this particular area. We service about 2,000 clients, helping them from a consulting standpoint in staying compliant and implementing safety programs. So I wanted to start off by going into what are the things that you need to do from an to have an effective safety program. There's a lot of guidance out there. What I'm going to try to do is speak a little bit to what are some of the implementation elements. What are the benefits of implementing this? Obviously, there's benefits, but there's also kind of a compliance or regulatory aspect to this as well. So some states, for example, like California, have what they call an injury illness prevention program. Federally, in other states, you might know this program as the name of I2P2. In the state of Washington, they call it a accident prevention program. And I've been doing this for about 25 years in helping thousands of businesses develop this injury illness prevention program and putting it in place, and then trying to help them in terms of implementation. So one of the critical elements of a leading safety culture is the development and implementation of an effective injury illness prevention program. As I said, I2P2, or accident prevention program. So of course, many think that an IIPP just applies to California, but the state that mandate the establishment and implementation of this was California initially. They did it back in 1991. What they did find through those years is that there's been a number of benefits, and California has been the leader in terms of reducing injuries in the workplace, and they contribute a lot of that to the IIPP. Federally, they implemented it a few years ago, what they called the I2P2, and basically what they did is mirror California's IIPP. So, you know, regardless of the company size that you have when it comes to safety and health and environmental compliance, the injury illness prevention program is a critical resource. Many employers are finding doors closing based on not having an IIPP. So for example, depending on the industry you're in and You know, if you're working with other contractors or other vendors or distributors, in many cases, they'll say that you need to have an injury illness prevention program. And as you may be starting up your business, you may, as part of putting together all the package requirements to kind of get your permits and to be able to get off the ground, from a safety and environmental standpoint, most of the regulators are going to have you put together an injury illness prevention program. So creating this document is only a small part of the overall process. You know, having an effective injury illness prevention program is usually a living, breathing document that must grow with your company and be maintained and revised accordingly. So it's not something that you necessarily just write, put on your shelf, and never look at it again. It's something that really guides you having a successful safety program and reducing injuries in the workplace. So when we look at what employers need to be doing, you know, one is having documents showing all the critical areas of compliance that your company's committed to, and actually doing what those documents state. That's a crucial element of it. There's a lot of businesses that develop an injury illness prevention program, put it on the shelf, and they've never really implemented it. But based on my experience, if you do implement this program, you are going to see some benefits from that. I'm going to talk a little bit about those benefits. You can also see some of the benefits up on the slide here today. And I'm going to kind of get into the different elements of what you should be doing to implement these safety practices and, you know, the importance of those as well. So IIPPs vary in size, the breadth and depth. So there's not kind of one fits all kind of situation. However, one of the things that we've done with KPAs, we've been able to kind of get the ball rolling with an IIPP based on your industry. And then we can kind of customize that based on the activity that you're doing. As you know, every business is a little bit different in terms of size, maybe even in terms of activity that they're doing. So those would require some customization as you would see. So I'm going to talk about basically 6 areas that you should be focusing on in implementing it in a safety program, and what the importance of those are. Okay, so more important than needing an IIPP, you really want one. There's no question that injuries can have an impact on your business. I think you would much rather have employees avoid injury and illnesses in the first place, and your IIPP can help your employees stay safe on the job and remain productive. They also help you avoid expensive costs, both direct and indirect, that come with a workplace injury. So I'm going to start off with one of the first ones, which is management's responsibility and leadership and participation within a program. So it's essential that the first step to developing your IIPP is identifying who's in charge of your safety plan and establishing the roles and responsibilities the person or persons in charge of your IIPP must have. So we're going to talk a little bit about what those are. And before I do that, one of the other important aspects of an injury illness prevention program, depending on the state that you're in, but I'll give you an example. In California, if you do not have an IIPP, let's say that you got an OSHA inspection and they came in and identified a few things that needed to be addressed, and you ended up getting a citation and a fine was associated to that. Or in a worst case scenario, you had a serious injury or maybe even a fatality, where you're certainly going to get OSHA on site to investigate that. In California, one of the things that, let's say that you had a fall hazard, and this happened actually at a cannabis business that I worked with, and they had an OSHA inspection, and it was because somebody was up on top of some of the greenhouses. The individual employee fell off there and ended up getting seriously injured. So OSHA came out and investigated that. One of the first things they asked for was the injury illness prevention program. employer at the time did not have an injury illness prevention program. They ended up with a citation of over $40,000. Now, typically in a situation like that, I would be able to normally appeal that. Best case scenario, I would get it basically taken off depending on what the situation was. Worst case scenario, I could get the fine reduced. But in order to even appeal that particular citation, you have to have an injury illness prevention program, and you have to show that you're implementing that program. That's an important aspect because over the years, I have had situations where employers had, hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines, and we didn't even have the ability to appeal it where we had a good case because they weren't implementing the injury illness prevention program. So again, management's responsibility is very important because the first thing they're going to do is want to talk with who is the responsible people at your facility and who has been identified in your written injury illness prevention program as the management support team. So one of the things that you want to be, if you are the responsible person in your injury illness prevention program, is that person needs to be knowledgeable about your workplace health and safety issues and the hazards associated with that and how to control those hazards within your workplace. In addition to having authority and responsibility for your workplace safety and health program, they also have to have the authority and responsibility to make necessary corrections in implementing the program. So that's kind of one of the first elements of establishing a injury illness prevention program, is ensuring employees are aware of who that person is and that has the authority and the responsibility for your injury illness prevention program. So how do employees follow the rules? That's a real important one as well. And this also leads me to, if you did have some type of serious injury, how did that occur? Did the employee just kind of disregard our rules and decide to do things on their own? Or did they, was it a true accident that, that occurred? So why that's important is that one of the things that is available to us in kind of going to OSHA, if there was a serious injury or fatality, is to talk about employees' accountability to our safety program. So if we have the written program and we're implementing all the different elements of it, and the employee just acted independently of our safety program, that does give us a case to push back on that particular citation or violation. And in many cases, if we are doing a good job in implementing our safety program, OSHA will accept that the employee did act independently of our safety program. So the IIP standard requires that employers establish a system for ensuring that employees follow the rules. So in other words, in your IIPP, you're going to have kind of what we call a code of safe practices, or what are your rules. So you want employees to read that, have access to it, and then of course you want them to follow those rules. So you're kind of constantly reinforcing that. The system must include informing employees about the requirements of your IIPP and safety procedures and the importance of them following that. So in order to achieve that, you should include a method for providing positive recognition of employees who perform and follow safe and healthful work practices. So I do encourage some type of positive recognition. It's very effective. I think sometimes we always go to the negative, where we're saying, put your safety glasses on, or wear your seatbelt, or, these type of things. But where I've seen really effective safety programs and really changing the culture within your organization is having some positive recognition and doing that on an ongoing basis. So for those employees who perform and follow safe and health work practices, it should also address what your disciplinary action is. So you're going to have positive, but you also have to have disciplinary action. And it needs to kind of follow what your employees who fail to follow those safety rules, what are the repercussions? So for example, a disciplinary action could be one event is verbal, second event is verbal and written up, third event may be taking that person and maybe giving them a week off. And then fourth disciplinary action could be termination. So you do want to spell that out. If you do end up going down that road with a particular employee, you want that written in your program. But it also gives, employees want to have guidance. They want to have rules, and they want to know what those rules are. So it's a really important aspect of what we do. Training is also involved in achieving a compliance, and it's also important in retraining employees who are maybe lacking safety. So usually, a disciplinary action may be just a verbal, but depending on what the occurrence was, you may say, hey, let's go over this again, and maybe you spend 5 or 10 minutes kind of reinforcing and retraining that particular employee. So make sure your system does not discourage employees from reporting injuries or symptoms. So, for example, if you do put together some type of positive recognition, you don't want it based on not having injuries in the workplace. You want to base it more on how they're implementing things within your organization from a safety standpoint. So are they identifying hazards and bringing that to your attention? Are they good about wearing their personal protective equipment? Things of that nature, where we're doing a positive recognition based on what they're doing, not necessarily putting some type of positive recognition about, for example, if we have 0 injuries this year, or we have 0 injuries in this particular quarter, we'll have a nice barbecue and we'll give out some prizes. That's not a good positive recognition, because what it does is it discourages employees from reporting injuries and or retaliating against employees that do report injuries. So if safety rules aren't followed, it's helpful to review the procedures to see if they are practical and achievable, and to consider if revisions are needed. So, if it just doesn't look like your procedures are practical, you might want to revise them. Have employees involved in creating those rules and procedures can also help that they're followed. So when you're creating your injury illness prevention program, I always encourage getting employees involved and having them help in creating some of those rules. That gives them ownership and makes them feel like they're part of the process. So establishing health and safety rules and work procedures is an important step in developing your IIPP. So it's a good idea to periodically review and update your rules and procedures. Make sure that they reflect your present conditions, because as you know, you might get a new piece of equipment in, you might be growing rapidly. So you went from 20 employees to now you got over 100 employees. All those type of things may involve you going back in and reviewing and updating your injury illness prevention program. So again, the most important thing is make sure your employees understand the steps they need to take in order to be in compliance. So a big part of this is communication. As a matter of fact, one of the most successful parts of an injury illness prevention program, and OSHA's written many articles in regards to this, is communication is the key. So how do you inform employees of your systems for communicating? So for example, you might have employees that are very verbal, and you have other employees that are not very verbal, but they do want to say something, but they feel like, if I do, you're going to probably, you may think differently of me. So some are, I want to say, maybe more amiable and don't want to necessarily speak up. So you do need to provide some type of communication factor that could be anonymous for the employee. That could be that they could be telling you something about a hazard within the facility. Could mean that they are feeling unsafe about something, but feel like they don't want to bring it up to their manager because the manager may think that they're just complaining. So you need to have an open communication, and you also need to reinforce from a management perspective that we want to hear from you. You are part of our safety program. The importance of an effective safety program is getting employees involved. And that's where you start seeing the culture change within your organization. So communicating in a way that is easily understandable and by all affected employees on matters that relate to workplace safety and health. And this means you should be prepared to communicate with employees in a language they understand. As you know, We could have a number of different language barriers, and so it's important to be able to address those. Communication can take place through your trainings, meetings, announcements, email notices. You know, you can do memos, you can do newsletters. There's a number of different things that you could do. One of the most effective ways is through what we call a safety committee meeting, where you have employee and management involvement, and it's a time to kind of openly communicate within that safety committee. Another really effective one is to have, and you may have seen this before, like a safety suggestion box, or it could be some particular network portal that you have where employees can anonymously put in a suggestion or some type of hazard that they've identified. So again, the important thing is you could tell your employees all the time that it's important to communicate, but unless you give them an effective way of doing that and an anonymous way of doing it, you may not get the results that you're looking for. So all employees must be informed about their IIPP and how it's being implemented, as well as their responsibilities to complying with its procedures. So communication systems should include provisions for encouraging employees to report. So again, constantly reminding them that, and maybe even, again, that could be a good important one that you have a positive reinforcement or positive incentive around, is employees that are communicating things and bringing up hazards and giving you an opportunity to fix those. Though that could be a positive incentive for employees as well. So encouraging those employees to report potential hazards in the work environment without any fear of reprisals. So one way to do that, again, is to have a notification systems where they can report things anonymously. So when you're conducting meetings with employees, make sure that you schedule general employee meetings. Make sure that they're consistent. One of the issues with really maintaining that culture safety culture within your business is being consistent, not kind of making a big focus on safety 1 month and then all of a sudden not really talking about it for 6 months and then bringing it up again. It should just be part of what you're doing on a daily basis. So schedule those meetings on a regular basis. They could be weekly toolbox meetings, they could be monthly meetings, they could be quarterly meetings, but you're going to want to spell that out. You want to be consistent with it, and employees should just know that this is going to happen and it's a time for them to attend. So that way you have maximum attendance to those meetings as well. Remember to do these for all shifts that you're having, and multiple shifts that you may have. So consider holding meetings at shift changes to try to maximize that attendance as well. Other considerations to meeting topics would be occupational accidents and injury history at your work site. So talking about if you have a really good work accident history, let your employees know that. That's something that you certainly should be talking about. Talk about the feedback from your employees, or ask for feedback from employees. Have guest speakers come in, or have a consultant come in that could talk in depth into some topics where you need to get more competent person type of training. Having safety material, as well. So things that you can do as far as handouts, things of that nature. So management should be present at these meetings. A lot of times I've done these over the years. I see employees in the meetings, but managers tend to not attend those. It sends a message. So you need to certainly have management present there. That shows that that's important, and document all those communication efforts. So as you'll be required to demonstrate that a system is being effective from OSHA, again, you need to document everything that you're doing from a safety perspective. You can say all day long that you're doing those particular things, but if you don't have them documented, it's as if you didn't do them. So it's a good, the IIPP standard does not require employers to establish health and safety committees, but I do feel like safety committees are a good way to involve employees, and it's in your safety, and to help implement an effective health and safety program. So establish that safety committee, do it on a quarterly basis as a minimum. and it'll help you meet the communication requirements of your IIP standard. And it also helps you establish a health and safety committee to meet the communication requirements of your IIPP standard. Your committee should include both labor management representatives. So meet regularly, prepare written records. So in other words, keep minutes, review your inspection results. So you should be inspecting, and I'm going to talk about hazard identification and assessment here as we move forward. So, but again, communication is very important. Talk about it. Communication is also putting posters and postings and things of that nature. That's also a part of communication. So hazard identification and assessment is one of the most important things you can do in kind of implementing your IIPP. So workplaces must have a procedure in place for identifying, evaluating all areas of your work environment, and looking for unsafe conditions, looking for unsafe work practices. And these procedures should include periodic inspections. Inspections can be made when the safety program is first established. It should be done whenever something new occurs within your, maybe it's a new piece of equipment or something like that, or a new process, or maybe you've changed your procedure. Those are all things that represent a new safety and health hazard. And whenever those happen, the employer should be making employees aware of that. And what are the control measures around that hazard? So, and again, if it's machine guarding, if it's, has to do with a new piece of equipment that they're going to operate, like an aerial lift or a forklift, making sure that you do training and make sure they understand what the hazards are and what your control measures are for doing that. So assessing hazards can be accomplished by conducting those regular inspections. They could be done daily. They could be done weekly. They could be done quarterly. These inspections will tell you what the hazard conditions are at the particular moment, how they could be equipment failure. It could be things that have changed within the workplace. So as you know, things change constantly. So it's not something that you do one time and shelf it. You should be doing it ongoing. Inspections are part of your daily safety health checks. I do like the daily checks that are done by managers or supervisors, maybe just in their particular department or area. And inspection should be conducted by personnel who, through experience or training, are able to identify actual and potential hazards and understand your work practices. So, sometimes that's something that an employee can grow into. Maybe it's a foreman or a lead or something like that. But it should be done initially by somebody that has some experience and knowledge of that, to be able to kind of initially look at what your hazards are and then putting some control measures in place. So your hazard assessment system should also include input from your employees about potential hazards and any suggestions. So we kind of talked about that in the communication part of that. But again, that's how you get buy-in. That's how you start changing your safety culture. And the procedures chosen need to result in a comprehensive evaluation of the hazards present in your workplace and should be documented. Again, could even be talked about in that safety committee. So when we look at hazard correction, you want to, when you're doing that, sometimes initially, if you don't have a lot of safety experience, sometimes it's good to get somebody with some knowledge and background, and somebody like myself, for example, that kind of comes in initially and identifies all the hazards and helps you put together some control measures, what kind of personal protective equipment, just giving employees gloves, for example. There's 100 different types of gloves out there. Which ones should I get? What are the hazards that I have that I should, that address the gloves that I should be getting, things of that nature. So hazard control is the heart of an effective injury illness prevention and the basis for developing your safe work procedures and accident prevention training. So employers need to have methods and procedures for correcting unsafe and healthy conditions. And if a hazard exists or is imminent, it cannot be abated right away without endangering employees or property. Remove all exposed personnel from the area, except those necessary to correct the existing conditions. So having a tracking log in place, or some way of one, identifying the hazards, and then two, tracking it to to controlling it. Some cases you might have a hazard that's going to cost you $10,000 to fix. May not be in your budget right away, so it's something you have to budget out, and you want to be able to track it so it doesn't get lost in the fold and that you do address it. Education and training is a really big part of this. You know, training is one of the most important elements of your IIPP. So it allows employees to learn their job properly, brings new ideas into the workplace, reinforces existing ideas and practices, and puts your program into action. So, you know, for example, if you give an employee a respirator, they need to know how to use it. They need to know how to maintain it. They need to know how to wear it properly. They need to know when to change out their filters. When is that going to happen? All that comes through training and instruction for your employees. So I know I just talked about one element, but there's, as you know, there's a lot of different hazards. There's a lot of different control measures, and training is where we kind of get the employees up to speed. So in training should be done both for supervisors and employees. So supervisors may have additional safety knowledge that they're going to need. So maybe the training goes into more in depth than it would for an employee. You also want to do it in a language and manner that they understand. So you know, sometimes that's a good online type of module where they're doing tests and it's kind of interactive. In other cases, it may be demo good for doing a demo. So, for example, if I'm doing fall protection, I may be talking about fall protection, but it's good to also actually even have a harness and lanyard and hook it up and actually show a demo of how to actually implement that. So, employees assigned to non-routine tasks must provide additional training. So, example, if I'm doing something for the first time, I should have some training on that. And if it's not something I do regularly, like let's say I lock and tag out a piece of equipment, I do that maybe once every 2 years, I'm going to have to kind of reinforce that training on a regular basis. So I always recommend continuing to do ongoing training. Annually is a good interval to kind of reinforce training with your employees. So even though you've covered the subject one time, I think it's important to kind of continue to keep reinforcing that. The IIPP standard requires that training be provided to all workers on the hazard in the workplace when they start work. So you need to have a good new hire orientation program where they're going through and getting the training. A lot of injuries occur within the first 60 days of somebody's employment, and that's due to a lot of employees don't get into the fold of training and education and all that kind of stuff. And so they're kind of working out there without a lot of knowledge on what your specific safety program is. So have a good new hire orientation, or whenever they're given a new job assignment, they should have some training around that on procedures and equipment and so on and so forth. If you're unable to conduct your own required trainings, you should have an outside consultant, have a LMS system, where learning management system where they can do it online, so on and so forth. So training and instruction is very important. And again, that's also where you can kind of reinforce your positive recognition of employees. You know, in those training rooms, you could, you know, hey, John did a great job. This is what he did. And, you know, people like recognition. So I really encourage that. To kind of summarize, to kind of wrap this up, record keeping is very important. Document everything. Have a system in place for documenting everything. That could either be done through, you know, a number of different things. People do it on an Excel spreadsheet, so on and so forth. You can also do it, and Dagen here is going to be talking about our learning management system and our software platform. It also has a lot of different things to be able to help you manage the documentation. Documentation management is a really important aspect. Being organized when you do it is important. And then, like I said, being consistent when you're doing that as well. So that kind of concludes what I'm going to talk about today. Really appreciate all your time. If you have any questions, please feel free to send them over. And thank you very much for your time today.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Joe. I know that that was you really touched on the different elements on building out a good safety program, implementing it well, getting buy-in from your management and your workers, identifying those hazards and assessing them, and then also really, really emphasizing the importance of training. So really excited to bring Dagen to the virtual stage to learn a little bit more about your all service solution in particular. And I think Dagen's going to start a screen share and actually lead us through a live demonstration of the platform. So Dagen, as you are ready, feel free to hop on here, give yourself a quick little intro and dive right into the screen share as you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brian. Brian, can I get a thumbs up from you that you can see the screen that I'm sharing there? That's great. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Appreciate your time. And like Brian said, my name is Dagen Boyd. I'm the Director of Business Development at KPA. I'm one of the original 3 co-founders of a product called iScout that got started in 2012. We were born kind of out of the oil and gas industry and worked into construction and industrial and manufacturing applications. And then we're actually acquired by KPA in December of 2020. So we spent all of this year as a part of the KPA family. It's certainly increased our resources. Now we've got consultants like Joe all throughout the country that we can rely on, and that our customer base can rely on as well. So I'm going to kind of show you the product that we refer to as KPA EHS. You know, what Joe was talking about in creating that program, the way that we kind of looked at it back in when we were starting this this company of creating this platform was the document that you create is the brains of your safety program. But what we lacked at the time was a heartbeat to that program of we had the what, but we didn't have the how, you know, and like Joe mentioned, being able to measure. Well, it is increasingly hard to measure paper forms, Excel spreadsheets. So we were wanting to ultimately create a platform that made our safety program easy to participate in and really give a heartbeat to what the document that we've created for our previous employer said. And so what we have here is really what we think is that heartbeat. I'm going to mirror my phone to this screen here as well. So this is my phone. I have this KPA EHS app. So the system is web-based, but it has native apps for iOS and Android. And really what we found from industry to industry, a significant hurdle in implementing software is implementation, right? So if everybody joining this webinar now, if you probably have a smartphone, you've probably downloaded apps. Well, if you downloaded a music app and you had to take a half day or full day class on how to use that music app, you would most likely delete it and just go find another. Okay, so we are in this era of app-based software where we don't need to learn how to use it. The expectation is we download it and we can just log in and we're off and running. So that's our goal here with the software, is making it easy to use for the employees is a critical piece in making it effective, okay? So we have a kind of a saying at KPA EHS that apps are like jokes. If you have to explain them, they're probably not any good. So the goal with our app is it's really designed to be that easy access point to participate in our safety program from the employee's perspective. So I'm kind of logged in here to this NCIA demo as this Derek Brown character. And when Derek logs in, these are the elements that he can see. It starts with an open task list. This is simply a running feed of anything that the system needs from him at any given point. So we can set a lot of schedules and reminders and alerts, and the goal there being, let's not alert Derek when something is expired. Let's alert Derek prior to those things expiring. So prior to a training expiring, like Joe mentioned, an annual training. So maybe 2 weeks in advance of that annual training expiring, we're going to notify the employee that training is due. You can see I've got a fire extinguisher notification here. We do manage equipment as well. Equipment on our customer side is anything that you want to call equipment. Safety equipment, vehicles, tools, lab equipment, facilities, warehouses, anything that you want to track in the system, create audits or inspections for those assets, and then you're going to create a schedule and assign the responsibility of those inspections to your employees. So you should never have to ask, has this fire extinguisher been inspected, or has your vehicle been inspected? Those triggers are going to happen automatically, and the employees are simply communicated to here. This bottom one, I'll kind of exercise that one just to show you how it would work here in the app. But this bottom one is what we call an acknowledgement. And when Joe talks about communication, making it very simple to communicate information to the field is one of the elements in the platform, and it's very easy to accommodate in the app. They simply get a push notification on your device, and everybody's had those where you get the little pop-up that says, hey, you have a text message or you have a new email. But they would click on that, and then an acknowledgement in our system is any message that you want to communicate to your employees, either company-wide, maybe it's just a certain location or job title that would trigger that. But it's anything that you want to communicate, and then you potentially want to capture their signature and acknowledgement of receipt of that communication. So I've set up one here. It's a great way to communicate document and policy change. Your safety policy has been updated. A certain state has a requirement that's been updated. We can communicate that out. So they're going to receive a text message. You can also include attachments as well. So this is an alert or an acknowledgement about document and policy change. I can see an attachment of that actual updated version of the policy. I go past that, and then all throughout our application, we have an easy way for employees to sign off. They can sign off on inspections, they can sign off on incidents, they can sign off on approvals. Just a very quick, easy way to sign off and click, I acknowledge this. And then you can see there, as employees take care of their open tasks, they're simply removed from their list. Additional places here, employees have access to just some background information, training. If they're a regulated driver, their DQ files are available in the site. We have a resources tab where you can post different documents. There's no limit here. So anything that you'd want to give your employees access to in the field, everything from the employee handbook to SDS sheets or SOPs. You can put these in different folders and organize them in categories just to make them easier to find. And then this Forms tab, this is really where collection of your data, conduction of your inspections occurs. The goal with our system is it's a platform where you can build all of these forms and inspections yourself. We do have a library of very common forms, but the goal here is that when your employees come to this tab, they're seeing the forms that you have created and that they're already comfortable with. So lots of flexibility when employees come to submit their forms. In our system, forms are available to complete offline. So if your employees are out in an area that has questionable connectivity, they don't have a signal, they're still able to submit any form in this tab, and then it will automatically load back to the server once connectivity resumes. So that's kind of the app. And again, it really is aimed at ease of use for the employee. The goal is, here's your username and password, and that really is our goal, is that's all that's required in order for them to begin participating. I'm going to log into the website for this demo environment, and I'm logged in as Derek Brown, who's an admin in the system, so he can see and do everything in the site. Your employees, you control what elements your employees can and can't do in the environment, and that's important simply because you don't want an employee filling out the wrong document and that triggering a workflow of procedures or alerts that really should never have been initiated. But very easy to track your employee information in the site, some high-level details here. You can include and record all of their trainings and create those schedules and benchmarks. The Forms tab, again, very, very flexible in what you can build here. Forms can be scored. So if you have an inspection that you want to produce a score, you can build that in. They can perform calculation functions as well. So we have lots of flexibility with the types of forms and how you can build your forms as well. In the equipment tab, again, anything that you would like to call equipment, you can. So we have groups in the cannabis industry where they have facilities and labs and warehouses and machinery. All of those things can be considered equipment. And then each asset individually, much like an employee, is going to have a dedicated profile with a QR code associated with it. You can add custom fields here to round out whatever information you would want to have associated with a particular asset. You can include attachments as well. So that way, if an employee is out in the field, there's my beautiful family there, and they're in the app and they click that code scanner, well, if I affix that QR code to any of my assets or warehouses or anything, I'm able to very quickly ascertain background information on that item. I can access any attachments, manuals, how-tos, anything associated with it. And then if I scroll down, I actually have access to view all of its previous inspection history as well. So just a very good way to collect the data, but also make it accessible for anybody who would want to potentially need to access it. Our training side has a lot of flexibility as well. I always kind of refer to it as two sides to the coin in training in our system. Everything here on the left is really about training management. What are your requirements? How often are they due? The training status report is a very easy way to understand, how are you doing as a company across all of your different trainings? How are individual employees doing? You could even understand how they're scoring on their quizzes for all of their different lessons. This is something that you can either manually come in here and apply filters and find a certain data set. Similar with forms, you can always manually go in and dig through that data, but you can also schedule those reports. So anything that you'd want to know on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis, we can put that subset of data in the system, and then it's just going to email us those results for those reports. So whether it's an inspection, whether it's incidents, or whether it's training, we can kind of automate the distribution of that information. We can manage group training for those in-person classes. We can manage corrective action items. If someone cuts their hand out on the job site, we could potentially make them take hand safety as a part of the corrective action. And again, all of this being able that data is very easy to access, to, like, going back to what Joe says, to be able to prove and document that your injury, illness prevention program is actually working and kind of transitioning along. The other side of the coin in our training section is the actual content itself. So we do offer a library of content. Since becoming part of the KPA family, our library has increased over tenfold. So we brought 74 lessons to the table when we were acquired by KPA. So we've integrated their content as well and have over 867 topics. I'll just kind of show you the 74 lessons that we brought in operate a little differently than a lot of the content that's out there. And we refer to that as customizable. So that training is customizable because it's completely editable by the end user. So this gives you the ability to jump into our OSHA spec fire safety lesson. And you can do everything from adjust the background music. You can swap out slides, add your own slides of content. So OSHA spec training, we don't really look at as a one-size-fits-all proposition. So you can go in here to any of our OSHA spec slides or lessons, and you can make them very, very specific to your facilities, the tools that you work with, the hazards your employees are going to be interacting with. You can even adjust the quiz questions and make sure you're asking questions that are really challenging and proving that your employees understand the hazards. With that customizable content, you can build all of your own lessons from scratch. So this is really where you can be laser focused on preparing your employees to work specifically in your area. And then communicating again, this is Derek Brown's profile. A huge element and a benefit of kind of modern software is Derek has the freedom to choose what language he would want to interact with our system in. So Spanish is by far our second most common. So if he chooses Spanish, you can see he's going to see and experience the entire platform in Spanish. He can report or submit all of his forms and inspections in Spanish. And he's even going to be able to conduct all of his training in Spanish. So it's going to translate all of the narration of all of those lessons, as well as all of the text. Hope you can hear that well. But that is a really high overview. A typical demo of this platform takes about an hour. But I hope you can see how giving a heartbeat to the document that Joe was referring to creating is a crucial piece. It's not just good enough to have a document that we put on the shelf that we show inspectors when they show up. Really to engage our employee base, bring them into the system, and have them be able to contribute and participate is a very important element in that. And that's what our software is designed to do. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to hand it back to Brian.
Thank you so much, Dagen. That was a fantastic, really interactive and intuitive platform. Really thought that it provided a good bookend to Joe's presentation about the importance of the safety programs. And I love your heartbeat of that actual program line. That's a great one to take away. So I think we're going to open it up to an open Q&A segment to round out today's program. I know we're coming close to the end of the hour for everybody. So as long as you don't have a conflict, do stick around to make sure that we have some additional conversation amongst the panel. We're going to dive right into some questions that were submitted by Katie to the Q&A board. If any additional questions want to be submitted by audience members at this time, please do post them to the Q&A board. Even if we do have to close out the program, we will ensure that we address these and follow up with them in the shared Slack channel that all of you all should have access to, and it'll be where we'll carry on the conversation for the next 2 weeks. Okay, so perfect. With that, Joe, I think I'm going to field one of these questions to you. Katie asked, around the midpoint of the program, are there any special trainings that she needs to be assigning as a cannabis company that you could expand on and elaborate to?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say there are some core trainings that need to be accomplished in the cannabis industry. Again, depending on what your operation is like, what kind of equipment you have, what kind of activity is going on, there could be additional trainings that are specific to the hazards. But the core ones that we look at are hazard communication. So that's dealing with any type of chemical, or I would just say material, really, because hazard communication could be silica dust, wood dust, it could be pollens, it could be a number of different things in terms of dealing with hazards. And then, of course, any kind of chemicals that are being used are also in that. That includes like safety data sheet training and access, what kind of proper personal protective equipment, what kind of engineering controls need to be in place, like ventilation, what kind of work practices need to be in place as far as maybe work rotation, things of that nature. So hazard communication is a big one. It's probably one of the most cited programs or training elements within the industry itself. So that's an important one. Another one is emergency response. Everybody has to understand, what do we do in case of a fire, an earthquake, a flood, a hurricane, all those kind of things. So you want to basically kind of outline what's your emergency action, what's your emergency response to one of those type of unfortunate events. And then we get into, I see from in the cannabis industry, a lot of fall protection hazards because people are elevating themselves in many different ways around the facility. So fall protection would be a good one. Normally I see a maintenance department that kind of goes around and maintains equipment and things of that nature. So you're looking at lockout as a potential there. Some of those are some of the core ones that I see that would apply really to almost any cannabis operation. But then we get into, for example, if you have tanks and in those tanks, they could be considered a confined space, or you might have a pit or a vault or something of that nature, which constitutes a confined space. Now, if employees are going into those, then you'd have like what we would call a permitted confined space. And that last cannabis client that I worked with, they did have confined spaces, one of those. Aerial lifts are another one. Forklift operation, if you have a forklift and you're moving material around, which I'm sure most of you would have a forklift, that would also require some training. Machine guarding, based on the different types of machines that are being operated. There's certainly machine guarding issues that I've seen and need to be addressed as well from a training standpoint. And then depending on the noise level around your facility, you'd want to do some initial evaluation of what those noise levels are, but you could be subject to a hearing conservation program, which means that you'd have to do some hearing and so on and so forth. And one of the ones that I did leave out was respiratory protection. I do find that a lot of employees are wearing at a minimum an N95 mask during certain tasks that they're doing. And so you would have to have like respiratory training as well. So another big one that we're starting to see a lot is hazardous waste or universal waste. So if you're generating, even if you're not generating hazardous waste, you're probably generating some type of universal waste, which could be batteries or light bulbs, fluorescents, things of that nature that have to be treated a certain way. They can't just be thrown in the trash. So we've been doing a lot of training around environmental issues, and that seems to be growing as well.
Fantastic. Well, sounds like there's a plethora of training programs that are specific to the cannabis industry that you definitely would suggest and recommend. So thank you for expanding on that a little bit for all of our participants and any of our people on Facebook Live that might not have access to the Q&A board at the moment. Well, thank you.
And just to reinforce, I mean, that kind of goes back to that hazard assessment. So in order to determine what trainings you're going to need, you have to kind of look at what are all the hazards that you have in your facility, and what activities are going on for your specific production. And then, from there, you'd be able to identify, based on their position, what kind of trainings that they would need. And I know in our software platform that you could also, let's say you assign a position to a particular employee, that system can be customized to identify what specific trainings would need to be done for that employee based on the position that they're doing. So there could be that initial build out of that to determine what those trainings would be. But then once you assign an employee, let's say you have a new employee or somebody that transfers to that position, you'd be able to assign them that position, and then those trainings would default as required as far as the types of trainings that they need to take.
Fantastic. Well, an all-in-one solution to not only identify, but also provide the trainings needed. So it sounds fantastic. I know that we are at time. However, that being said, I do want to try and address this audience question if we're able to squeeze it in. Joe, do you have any opposition to fielding one more question we just got from the chat room?
No, absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you, Nathan, for fielding this question. So let's pose this to the panel. So Joe has a question and then a comment on the end of that to provide some context. So Nathan asked to Joe, any way to roll out incentives for reducing work comp claims with employees? Incentivizing is such an empowering tool. So any strategies to incentivize a safety culture while avoiding any liability centered around the don't report culture you mentioned earlier in the presentation would be very helpful.
Yeah, so I would look at, and some of the ones that I've seen that are very effective are focusing on implementation factors of the injury illness prevention program that I mentioned. So what I mean by that is, you can incentivize employees that that identify hazards and report those to management. And that's a really good one, because you get people involved in looking for hazards and reporting those hazards, because that's where you kind of get buy-in from the employee. They also see immediate response from management, because, for example, an employee may identify a hazard and nothing gets done about it. But if they're incentivized to bring that to management, so in other words, whoever brings the most hazard identifiers to management, that could be incentivized in a particular way. So some of the things that I've seen could be simply as recognition. Others could be maybe some type of gift certificate or some type of prize or something like that. You could get real creative on what you're going to do in terms of incentivizing that, but I would look at it more in terms of the implementation. Maybe somebody that's completed all their trainings in a timely manner, they get recognized and incentivized for doing that. All of those things that in terms of the implementation are going to drive down the injuries, because as employees are more educated, they're going to do things more safely, and you're going to see a reduction in comp claims. You can't necessarily just say, hey, if we have zero comp claims over the next month, we're going to, incentivize you. That discourages people, like I said before, from bringing those things up. So there's a lot of things that you can do around that. There's a lot of strategies, and it just depends on your business and what you're willing to do. But like I said, I think if you focus on those different implementation factors, completing things in a timely manner, their involvement, their safety, the culture, but you don't want to incentivize that, hey, we haven't had any injuries, that type of thing.
Yeah, fantastic. I think your point of positively reinforcing that is a really key element to that, and definitely providing a solution that can really achieve all of these things in an all-in-one platform is definitely going to help that along there. Love the recognition and the gamification ideas. Perfect. And there's some appreciation from Nathan right there. So thank you so much, Joe, for addressing that final question. We are a few minutes over time. So if any additional questions do come up before we lead the panel in a final thought segment, I do just want to make one additional mention that all of you all should have been invited to a shared private Slack channel surrounding today's session. We will keep that Slack channel open for the next 2 weeks to maintain communication, allow you all to directly network with our speakers, sponsors, and NCIA staff, and amongst yourselves, so that you can learn more about this amazing subject from each other as well, leading up to our final event and conference in December later this year. So with that, I will turn it back over really quickly for Joe and Dagen to provide a final thought from their portion of today's presentation before we close things out with our typical closing segment and member appreciation.
Well, this is Joe, and I just want to say again, thank you so much for giving us an opportunity to talk to you about it. This has been 25 years of my life in terms of helping businesses get in compliance and reducing injuries. And I've seen a very positive impact from that. I encourage you to have a good safety program in place. It benefits you, it benefits your employees, and it benefits your families as well. I've seen a lot of injuries over the years where employees basically are devastated because of the seriousness of the injury. They're not able to ever get back into the workforce, and the impact that it's had on those kids and their wife and their family, it's just devastating to see. So any way that we can prevent that by implementing good programs, keeping it as an important part of what you're doing in your business, it's going to benefit you, it's going to benefit your employees. Anything that I could do personally to help you, feel free to reach out. As Brian said, we've got the Slack channel, so feel free to ask any questions. I'll be more than happy to answer those, and look forward to hopefully hearing from you. Thank you again.
Fantastic. Well, did you want to add anything else, Dagen, or leave it at the heartbeat of your actual program with your fantastic demonstration?
Well, I appreciate the fantastic demonstration comment. I wish my wife was around to hear that. I would just echo Joe, just as thanking everybody in the group. I really believe it's important for the employees to be part of your program and not just the recipient of edicts about what they should and should not be doing. There is a big difference there in the buy-in, where instead of you telling them what they need to be doing, them agreeing that, hey, this is good for everybody, and that they feel a part of creating that program. It'll really do you good in the long-term success of that program. But thanks again for your time today, and please let us know if we can be helpful.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Joe and Dagen, for wrapping things up today and for leading our audience through such an amazing presentation and demonstration of the subject matter, as well as an interactive demonstration of your product and service. With that, we're going to close out today's Industry Essentials educational webinar. One last huge thank you to all of our participants for joining us for another Industry Essentials webinar. And a huge thank you to our members of our panel for presenting today's session, as well as, most importantly, our member business owners that are essential in driving NCIA's mission forward. I know a number of you all are currently non-members, so I would suggest all of you head to thecannabisindustry.org/join following today's broadcast to learn how you can link into NCIA's community via membership and take advantage of all the amazing benefits that we're offering. I will make a quick mention that if you haven't marked your calendars for December 15th through the 17th, please do so. Our 7th annual Cannabis Business Summit and Expo will be coming to the San Francisco area for the biggest and best event that we've ever hosted. So I'm really excited to hopefully see all of you all there. NCIA members do get free or heavily discounted tickets to attend that conference. So I really look forward and hope that all of you all will join NCIA and then join us for our year-end blowout in the Bay Area. Once again, a huge shout out and thank you to our sponsor for today's session, KPA, a leader in compliance and safety software space. Thank you for joining us to discuss safety and compliance programs facing the cannabis industry today and what companies have discovered as a real viable solution. As always, we'll leave you all with this end of event credit sequence highlighting the 30+ member businesses that participated in this afternoon's session and make up our evergreen member roundtable featuring some personally produced music stylings to enjoy. If you don't see your company included in the slideshow, don't be discouraged. That just means you need to head to NCIA's website today following today's session to join the movement for a responsible and equitable cannabis industry. Enjoy, and we'll see you hopefully again next week for another NCIA Industry Essentials educational webinar. See you all then. Thank you again, KPA.